ladies and gentlemen, we have the pleasure to welcome a special guest today. It's a woman, it's a leader involved in advocating for peace, in security, and youth. I guess I'm not right, Cynthia.
Yes, you're right, Evan. I work in youth, peace, and security. I serve as the African Youth Ambassador for Peace for the Southern Africa region. And I'm based in South Africa and originally from Zimbabwe.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. And if you don't mind, we are going to start this interview with one query. If you have to put aside your professional background in order to introduce yourself, what will you say? In other words, who is Cynthia Chigwenia?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, given that this is a professional interview. But if I'm to define myself outside my work in peace and security or development, I think I am just a young African youth who is passionate about seeing things differently in my community, in my workspace, or in even in my country. So a young person, a young African woman who aspires for a better Zimbabwe, a better Southern Africa region, and a better Africa for everyone.
Okay, thank you for this first answer. And if you don't mind, we are going to proceed with the following concern or query. Peace, struggle against poverty, and climate change. According to you, what is the link between those three elements?
What is the link between peace, climate change, and?
Struggle against poverty.
Okay, and the struggle against poverty or poverty alleviation.
Yes.
I would start with peace, not only because it's what I focus most of my work on, but because it really is the bedrock of development. For example, if you think about war and conflict, you cannot put up big buildings, you cannot do business as usual, you cannot travel when countries are really at armed conflict. So I think peace is the bedrock of, development or our livelihoods. We need to live in peaceful environments. And then when it comes to climate change is one of the defining issues of our time. And it also has an aspect of challenges or threats to peace and security. If you look at the Southern Africa region where I am from, the region is prone to cyclones, particularly within from the Mozambique to Malawi, Zimbabwe. In the past, I think it was in 2019, where there was a cyclone that affected those three countries at the same time, which is Cyclone Idai. So what we see with climate change is that it has impacted how we understood peace and security. Traditionally, we thought of threats to peace and security as, just fighting and guns, but even such environmental hazards exacerbate or they worsen the living conditions of people within a society, and they become a threat because human security is exposed to these environmental hazards. And then when it comes to poverty alleviation, I think these are what some people would call part of the wicked problems in academia. And it's also one of the reasons in which we see again threats to peace and security being worsened. For instance, if we look at issues such as limited or unemployment, that creates a gap that can then be utilized or used by those that radicalize people to get into violent or extremist activities. So, for example, if somebody is unemployed and they are in difficult or dire situations, extremist groups could use that as an opportunity to lure that person into engaging again in violent conflicts, with money being the incentive to say, we'll give you this much money if you join this radical group. So the issues are very interlinked. When it comes to poverty, we speak again about malnutrition and countries or households not being able to produce food, and that again contributes to household poverty. So issues around peace, climate change, and poverty reduction are very linked in that negative aspect, but also very linked in terms of the positive. So where there is a peaceful coexistence and a government prioritizes sustainable farming, sustainable development, then we also see that it also helps in alleviating or reducing poverty. So in the positive sense, then this is how those three aspects are linked.
Thank you, Cynthia, for these enlightenments. And let's proceed with another query. According to you, what are the prospects for the African youth in the current context featured by uncertainties?
I'm going to ask you to repeat the question again, Evan. What are the prospects for?
The African youth in the current context featured by uncertainties.
Okay, so what are the prospects for African youth in the current context that is featured by uncertainties? I think what uncertainties present are also opportunities. There's the opportunity for African youth to rise to the call, especially when it comes to countries moving towards digitalization and using artificial intelligence. For several countries, we've seen shifts to technology, either when it comes to governance, and I think these are opportunities that young people themselves, because they're innovative and tech-savvy, could grab and maximize, so that they contribute to development, and they contribute to even lessening the insecurities that we see, not just within the individual countries themselves, but these are insecurities that are global. So not just for Africa, but insecurities all over, especially after COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, let's now focus on your activities as African Union Youth Ambassador for Peace for Southern Africa. If you have to present your
yes.
or if you have to present or highlight your activities in this area to our readers, what would you say?
There are several highlights for me in this position. In the first being the different engagements or interactions I've had with the young people themselves. I always say they give my mandate the reason, and one of the words that I usually use is the word amplify. And to amplify is to increase upon or to add on to something. So one of the highlights is being a representative of a region that has young people that are organized, that allow me to amplify the work that they're doing. So that's one of my highlights. I think the different interactions when I am at a conference or a meeting and I find someone from Mozambique who says, I'm doing this in Mozambique, or I'm doing this in Botswana, or in Zambia, or in Angola, that's always, I think, a highlight for me. And then in terms of the policy and legislature, one of the highlights we have is the Bujumbura Declaration on Youth, Peace and Security in Africa. This was adopted and endorsed by the African Union last year, and the declaration promotes or encourages for young people to meet annually and discuss youth, peace and security, or peace and security in general. Before our appointment as African Youth Ambassadors for Peace, this was not in existence, and this came about as that advocacy of ourselves collective as African Youth Ambassadors for Peace, and also the different young people and organizations that were represented in Burundi last year. And in addition to that, it's also, I think, for Southern Africa, for the Southern Africa region specific, we had the regional sensitization meeting on youth, peace and security, where we brought together people from different countries in Southern Africa to discuss youth, peace and security on the sidelines of the high-level interministerial meeting on youth, peace and security in Southern Africa. So again, those are some of the highlights that I have, and I think that's definitely something to build upon for those that will take this position immediately after my tenure or even in future. I think those are great developments.
Thank you. And now another query. What do you think about political dialogue in African countries today?
What do I think about political dialogue in African countries today? That's an interesting question because it touches on my work with my full-time work, which is with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and we actually focus, our program is called Political Dialogue for Sub-Saharan Africa. It was absolutely necessary, and I think a lot of issues, or for example, that countries have are best addressed with dialogue as a sort of soft diplomacy method. For example, be it outbreak of conflicts, I think engaging or even conflict mediation comes in form of dialogue between the warring parties. But not only in negative light, I also think that, for example, issues around trade or issues around bilateral relations to enhance economic activities can be engaged on or developed further through dialogues. And then finally, as you may know, Africa has got different countries that have got post-colonial histories. So also issues around Africa-Europe relations, Africa-China-Russia relations can also be best articulated in the forms of dialogues and engagement. So it's absolutely necessary in resolving both the difficult or complicated conversations, but also even engaging on the way forward when it comes to current and future relations between not only African countries, but also Africa and other continents.
Okay, thank you. Now the other query, but it seems like you already provided answers to this other query, which is focused on your thoughts about political dialogue within the frame of international relationships nowadays.
Okay, so my answer has touched on that, especially when it comes to Africa's relations with Europe and Africa's relations with China and other external partners. And we've seen this at engagements like the Africa-Europe conference or the US-Africa Leaders Summit. So we see again, this prioritization or, importance of engaging when it comes to international development and governance.
Okay, thank you. And now another query. What are your insights concerning the upcoming BRICS Summit scheduled for August 2023 in South Africa?
Evan, I'm not too sure if I'm qualified to comment on BRICS. I'm not a BRICS specialist, and I do not want to mislead your listeners by posing to be one. But I think overall, just from the surface level, from what I read, I think BRICS provides a platform for South Africa to enhance its relations with Brazil, India, China, as well as Russia. So I think it's one of the platforms through which South Africa can enhance its relations. It also provides a room for policy discussions for South Africa as a country, but also even for the Southern Africa region itself. And I think it would be interesting to see the outputs of the summit and how they shape the current affairs or current discussions around global governance and global hegemony, which we saw in the recent years has come under challenge, but also multilateralism. We see again, and I would relate this to the call for at least African countries to have a permanent seat within the United Nations. So I think BRICS as a platform would also be very interesting to see what the outcomes from that are and how they impact the other issues I touched on in terms of global governance and politics.
Okay, thank you. And now one last query. Three things helping you to keep motivated despite the current context marked by uncertainties.
Three things that help me to stay motivated.
Yes.
The first one would be, I think it will relate to what I said in the beginning, that I think more than my profession, more than what I do in my occupation, I am an African youth who is passionate about, seeing a different reality, at least if not for myself, then for other young African people to come after us. So one of the things that motivate me is a possibility of a different reality for other people. Acknowledging that, the current context may be discouraging, we might have certain challenges, but maybe for someone who's going to be a youth in 20 years' time, they will say, because the youth of 2023 or that came before us were outspoken and they managed to change one or two or three things, that's highly motivating for me. The second reason I would say I owe my motivation or commitment is Christianity. I'm a firm believer in God and in Christ, and I see of it my leadership not just as my work, but also an extension of godly work, or improving humanity. And I find most courage in the Word of God. I find the Bible to be, very appropriate or suitable for any occasion whatsoever. When I feel discouraged, when I feel happy, when I feel like I do not have hope, I think the Bible is a constant reference for the different phases and points in my life, and I think that has helped me a lot. And then the third one, what keeps you motivated? I think the third one is the people around me. The people around me, my work can be really challenging, really taxing, but being able to have a supportive family, sisters or supportive friends, that goes a long way in providing courage when things are tough. Yeah, that also goes a long way in celebrating when things are good and you feel I have accomplished this or achieved this. It's always good to celebrate it as a collective. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I am Shona speaking, and in Shona, when people are greeting each other, they say "Tiripoka na muripo" or "Tiripoka na makaniyo," which means I am well if you're well, or I'm okay if you're okay. So I think bringing in those friends or family or even workmates that come in to support when you need support, to celebrate when you need to celebrate, I think that is very important, because it also brings about this idea that the work that I'm doing is not just for myself, but I'm part of the society or a bigger group. And those are the three things that keep me motivated. Being an African youth and aspiring towards a different and inclusive and integrated Africa. The second being my religion, which is Christian, and the third being family. Those are key important pillars for me. Okay,
thank you, Cynthia, for making yourself available for this interview. Thanks for the enlightenments you provided to us concerning all these queries, and we hope we have the opportunity to discuss with you before the end of the year on a different topic. if you don't mind.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.